It was a Tuesday evening when I came home from work, tired enough to consider skipping dinner altogether. My key stuck a little in the lock, something I'd been meaning to fix for weeks, and the hallway light flickered when I flipped it on. Normal stuff, the kind of small domestic irritations you barely notice after a long day. What I did notice was the receipt sitting on the kitchen counter, just lying there, half tucked under the fruit bowl like someone had tossed it there in a hurry. At first, I didn't think much of it. We both left stray receipts lying around, grocery store, gas station, takeout orders, so I picked it up mostly to move it out of the way. But the logo printed across the top stopped me cold. La Mer, downtown San Diego. White tablecloths, candlelight, live jazz. A reputation for being one of the most romantic restaurants in the city, and also one of the most expensive. The kind of place where even the appetizers feel like an indulgence. Lauren and I had only been there twice. Once for our anniversary and once when I got my promotion. Those nights had been special, *mate. A table for two, hands brushing across the linen, voices lowered as if the mood itself demanded it. I scanned the rest of the slip. 2 entrees, sea bass and filet mignon, both among their pricier options. A bottle of Pinot Noir, a label I recognized because I'd once looked it up and winced at the price. And then, at the bottom, chocolate soufflé shared. Lauren hated sharing dessert. She always ordered her own, even if she couldn't finish it. She once told me she didn't like competing for bites because it made her feel rushed. And yet here it was, in black ink, her sharing something meant to be eaten slowly, *mately. I was still staring at the paper when I heard the soft pad of footsteps from the hallway. "Hey!" Lauren's voice came before she did. A moment later, she stepped into the kitchen. She was wearing the red dress, the one I'd bought her our first Christmas together, wrapped in a little gold box because I knew it would make her eyes look even brighter. She had on the heels she only wore when she really wanted to make a statement, and her hair was styled the way she usually only did for weddings or formal events. Loose curls, perfectly set, with that faint shimmer of something in it that caught the light when she moved. I felt my hand tighten around the receipt. She noticed. Her gaze flicked to the paper, and for the briefest moment her smile faltered. But then she laughed lightly, stepping forward to set her purse down. "Oh yeah, that," she said, nodding toward it as if she'd forgotten it was there. "We went out after work. A little celebration for Maria's promotion. You remember Maria, right?" I nodded slowly. "Maria from marketing? That's the one," she said, voice warm, practiced. She pulled open the fridge as she continued talking, her tone airy. "We just ordered a bottle for the table. You know how it is. And the dessert," she chuckled, shaking her head, "was a total group thing. We were all stuffed, but someone insisted, so we just split it for fun. Harmless." She poured herself a glass of water, not looking at me as she spoke. Her words sounded harmless, too. Perfectly logical. The kind of explanation you'd accept without a second thought if you weren't already looking for cracks. But I was looking, and I noticed things. She didn't actually say who we was. She didn't name anyone besides Maria. She didn't explain why the bill showed exactly 2 entrees, 1 bottle of wine, and 1 dessert. And she didn't mention why she was still dressed like this nearly 2 hours after work should have ended. I leaned back against the counter, receipt still in hand. "You went straight from the office?" She nodded, sipping her water. "MHM. Didn't even have time to change. Kind of wish I had. This dress isn't the most comfortable when you're sitting for hours." I smiled faintly, like I believed her. "Guess it's been a while since I saw you wear it." Her eyes met mine for a second, then slid away. "Yeah, thought I'd make an effort for the night. Maria's been through a lot lately. So..." She let the sentence trail off. The fridge door shut with a soft click, and she crossed the room, brushing past me on her way to the stairs. I caught the faint scent of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, the one she only wore on special occasions. "Gonna shower," she said lightly, glancing over her shoulder. "You eat yet?" "Not hungry," I replied. She nodded and disappeared up the stairs. For a long time, I stood there in the kitchen, the house settling into its quiet evening rhythm. The ceiling fan hummed softly above me. Outside, The faint whoosh of cars drifted in through the window, but all I could really hear was the faint crackle of the paper in my hand. It wasn't just a receipt anymore. It felt heavier, like evidence. Not enough to accuse her, not enough to prove anything, but enough to spark something in me I couldn't put out. I set it back on the counter where I'd found it, though now it sat at the center like it belonged there. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe it was just a harmless night out with colleagues. A little splurge for someone's promotion. Maybe the wine was just an indulgence, and the dessert a light-hearted whim. But deep down, I knew better. The last few months had been filled with small changes. Shifts in her schedule, little habits that didn't quite add up. And this felt like a thread dangling from the edge of something I didn't yet understand. And I knew sooner or later I was going to have to pull it. After that night, the receipt never left my mind. I didn't keep it, at least not physically, but the image of it was burned into me like a watermark I couldn't scrub out. It would come back in flashes. The neat, itemized print. The way the subtotal and tip formed two perfect, damning lines. The little note at the bottom thanking them for a lovely evening. At first, I told myself to let it go. People go out after work. People celebrate promotions. But once the thought takes root that something might be off, it's like a drip from a leaky faucet. You can ignore it for a while, but eventually the sound gets louder than anything else in the room. Over the following weeks, I started noticing things I probably would have brushed off before. Lauren began staying late at the office more often, always with an explanation that sounded almost too ready. Deadlines creeping up, she'd say, or, we had a last-minute meeting. I'd nod. But somewhere in the back of my mind I'd remember how, when we first started dating, she would text me the second she knew she'd be late. Now, half the time I found out only when the clock passed 7 and she still wasn't home. Then there was her phone. She'd started keeping it on silent all the time, face down on the counter or tucked into her bag. If I walked into the room while she was texting, she'd finish quickly and lock the screen like it was an instinct. Once, I asked if her battery was low, because I noticed her location sharing was off, and she said, "Oh yeah, it died earlier." She said it casually, even as the screen lit up with a fresh notification. Weekends changed, too. She started taking business trips on short notice. Overnight stays in cities where, as far as I knew, she didn't have clients or close friends. The first one, she told me it was for a networking conference. The second was supposedly to meet a potential partner firm. But when she came back, there were no business cards, no follow-up materials, nothing to show for it. And then there were the rides. One Sunday morning, while she was still asleep, I used her tablet to look up directions for myself. The rideshare app was still open from her last trip. It showed a drop-off at the Marlowe Boutique Hotel, 3 times in the past month, all late at night. I asked her about it once, keeping my tone light, pretending I was just curious. "Oh, that," she said. "We had some after-hours project discussions there. You know how it is, neutral ground, good coffee, no office distractions." I nodded, but in my head, the picture kept shifting. That hotel was known for 2 things: overpriced cocktails in the lobby bar and rooms that came with champagne, welcome packages. Her social calendar shifted in other ways, too. She used to invite me to her corporate mixers, the charity dinners, the awards nights. I'd meet her colleagues, watch her navigate the room with ease, feel like part of her professional world. Lately, the invites stopped coming. If I asked, she'd say, "Oh, it's more of an internal thing." Or, "You'd be bored, it's just shop talk." Once, I decided to show up to one of these events anyway. She'd mentioned it in passing, and I figured I'd surprise her, maybe grab a drink together afterward. When I got there, she was across the room, standing with a group of people I didn't recognize. She looked right at me, and then looked past me, like I was just another stranger. I approached her, trying to play it cool. She smiled briefly, said she was mid-discussion, and turned back to her group. That night, we went home separately. Evenings at home became different. Sometimes we'd be sitting on the couch watching a show and her phone would light up. She'd glance at it, smile faintly, and start typing. When I'd ask who it was, the answer was always vague: just work, or a friend, or you wouldn't know them. One night, I caught her smiling at her phone so intently she didn't notice me walking in. "Who's that?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She flinched slightly before answering. "Oh, Maria. She's asking about a design mock-up." Maria again. The same Maria whose promotion supposedly inspired that expensive dinner. I didn't push it, but I filed it away. My mind kept looping through the timeline of when these changes began. The late nights, the trips, the distance. They all seemed to start around the same time. The same month she stopped talking about us taking a vacation. The same month she started buying new clothes without mentioning them. One Saturday, while she was out running errands, I opened our closet. In the back, tucked into a garment bag, was a dress I'd never seen before. Deep blue silk, unmistakably expensive. It wasn't the kind of thing you wore to the office, and it still had the store's tissue paper in the folds. I zipped the bag shut without touching it, feeling like even that was too much intrusion. It was strange how suspicion changes your perception of everything. Things that once felt ordinary now seemed weighted, suspicious by association. The perfume she wore, the way she'd hum softly while getting ready. Even the fact that she started taking showers at odd times, like before bed instead of in the morning. The tipping point came one evening when she left her laptop open on the dining table. She was in the shower, and I told myself I wasn't going to snoop. But my eyes drifted to the browser window. There, in plain sight, was a booking confirmation for the same boutique hotel. Check-in Friday night, check-out Saturday afternoon. Under number of guests, it said 2. I didn't touch the laptop. Didn't even scroll. I just stared at the confirmation until the words blurred. When she came downstairs, hair damp and smelling faintly of shampoo, she smiled. "Thinking of ordering Thai tonight?" I nodded, my voice steady even though my chest felt tight. "Sure, that sounds good." Because what could I say right then? I didn't have enough to confront her without giving her a chance to erase the rest. And some part of me, call it denial, call it self-preservation, wasn't ready to hear her tell me what I already suspected. But I knew I'd crossed a line in my own mind. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was pattern recognition. And patterns, in my experience, don't lie. It happened on a Thursday afternoon, one of those rare days when I got to leave the office early. Traffic was light for once, and I remember thinking I might surprise Lauren by picking up dinner or maybe just being home before she was. As I turned onto our street, I noticed something unusual. 2 blocks from our house, parked at the curb, was a black sedan idling. I might not have thought twice about it. People park there all the time, except the driver's side door opened, and Lauren stepped out of our neighbor's side path like she'd been walking there casually all along. Except she wasn't alone. The driver got out too. Tall, well-groomed, wearing a tailored suit that wasn't standard for a casual visit to this part of town. His face was familiar in a way that made my stomach knot instantly. I'd seen him in pictures from Lauren's company events, usually standing near the center, smiling like he owned the room. Mark, her boss. They were talking in low tones as they walked toward the car together. She was smiling, but not the polite public kind of smile. This one had softness to it, an ease that made me feel like I was intruding just by seeing it. And then, without hesitation, she reached for his hand. Not a quick clasp, not a friendly shake. She held it, fingers interlacing like it was something they'd done 100 times before. My chest tightened. The sedan pulled away from the curb, heading toward downtown. I followed, not tailgating, not drawing attention, just keeping enough distance to see without being seen. My hands were gripping the wheel harder than I realized. They didn't stop at the office. They didn't stop at a restaurant. They drove straight to the Marlowe Boutique Hotel. The sight of it wasn't a shock. Not after the ride history, the booking confirmation. But seeing it with my own eyes changed something. Turned suspicion into reality. They parked in the underground garage, and I found a spot across the street where I could watch the elevator entrance. A few minutes later, they emerged into the hotel lobby, walking side by side. He reached for the small of her back as they approached the front desk. She didn't flinch. I watched them get their key cards, watched them turn toward the elevators. At one point, she leaned in to say something, and he laughed, his arm now fully around her waist. The elevator doors slid shut, taking them out of sight. I sat there for a long time, engine running, feeling the quiet hum of the car beneath me. Part of me wanted to storm in, demand answers on the spot. Another part of me knew that walking into that lobby would only give them a chance to spin the story, make it seem less than it was. Half an hour passed before they reappeared. When they stepped out of the elevator, there was no rush in their movements. He was talking to her like the rest of the world didn't exist. She had that same softened smile, and when they walked out to the street, his hand found hers again. This time I didn't follow. I just watched them drive away, the black sedan disappearing into traffic like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. When I finally headed home, I parked in the driveway and sat there, staring at the steering wheel. My hands still hurt from how tightly I'd been holding it. The house looked the same as it always did, front porch light off, blinds drawn, but it felt different now. Like the air inside was tainted before I even stepped through the door. I didn't go in right away. Instead, I walked around the block once, letting the cool air sting my face. I told myself I wasn't going to confront her tonight. Not because I didn't have proof, but because I wanted more. I wanted it to be undeniable, something she couldn't talk her way out of with a smooth explanation about promotions or client meetings. When I finally did go inside, the house was quiet. No sign she'd been home yet. I hung up my jacket, went to the kitchen, and poured a glass of water just to give myself something to hold. That night, she came home late. I was still sitting at the table, pretending to read something on my laptop. She kissed me on the cheek, light and quick, like she always did when she wanted to breeze past a late arrival without comment. "Long day?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Yeah, meeting ran over. Sorry." I nodded, keeping my voice even. "At the office?" She didn't hesitate. Of course. It was almost impressive, how easily the lie rolled off her tongue. We didn't talk much more that night. She went upstairs early, saying she was tired. I stayed downstairs, staring at the blank TV screen, listening to the faint creak of the floorboards above me. The next day, I started taking steps. Small, careful ones. I dug out an old laptop she thought I'd stopped using, the one she never bothered to check. I installed software that could back up her cloud files without alerting her. I searched through credit card statements, phone records, anything that might connect the dots between her stories and the truth. It wasn't just about catching her anymore. It was about making sure that when I finally acted, there wouldn't be any room for her to rewrite what had happened. Because if yesterday was about seeing enough to believe it, tomorrow would be about making sure the whole story came into the light. When I got home after following Lauren and Mark to the Marlowe, the decision was already forming. Quiet, steady, inevitable. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I'd seen enough to know what was happening, but seeing wasn't the same as proving. If I came at her now, she'd deny, deflect, and twist the story into something I couldn't disprove without hard evidence. So I decided to give her rope. Enough to wrap herself in until the truth was inescapable. The first thing I did was go upstairs to our bedroom closet and pull out my old duffel bag. I laid it flat on the bed and started packing, just the essentials at first. A week's worth of clothes, my toiletries, my passport. Then I added a few personal items I didn't want to leave behind. Family photos, a watch my dad gave me, the old leather journal I'd kept since college. I didn't know exactly when I'd leave, but I knew I'd be ready when the moment came. That night, I sat in the dim light of the living room after she'd gone to bed. The old laptop was open in front of me, its fan whirring softly. It was an older model, slow compared to what I use for work, but that was the beauty of it. Lauren thought it was too outdated to be of any use, so she wouldn't think twice about me having it out. I started with the obvious, her email. The password hadn't changed in years. I scanned through her inbox, skipping the fluff until I reached the personal folder she never mentioned. Inside were chains of messages, some from Mark, others from an account I didn't recognize but guessed was his personal one. They weren't explicit enough to be scandalous on their own, but the tone was int asterisk mate, the kind of familiarity that doesn't grow from boardroom meetings. Then there were the receipts. Not just from restaurants, but from hotel bookings that matched the times she'd claimed to be on business trips. There were digital confirmations, often made on weekday afternoons, that showed 2 guests. No names for the second person, of course, but paired with the pattern of her absences, it was as clear as the moon in a cloudless sky. I copied everything: emails, booking confirmations, even photos I found buried in her cloud storage that she must have thought were private. Some were harmless on their own. A picture of a wine glass in a hotel room, a city skyline from a high floor. Others, less so. There was one of her standing in front of a mirror, wearing a dress I'd never seen before, smiling at the camera like she was in on some secret. I saved it all to an external drive I'd bought earlier that day. Then I duplicated it onto a second drive, one I stored in a locked box in my car. By the time I finished, the clock read just after 2 in the morning. I closed the laptop and sat there for a long while, staring at the blank screen. The next step was to secure a place to stay. I didn't want to be under the same roof when things came to a head. There was too much potential for chaos, too much risk of her playing the victim to buy herself sympathy points. I texted a friend, Tom, someone I trusted completely, and told him I needed to crash for a while. He didn't ask questions, just sent back his address and the code for his front gate. Over the next 2 days, I moved things gradually. A few clothes in the trunk one day, my shaving kit the next, until most of what I cared about was already at Tom's place. At home, I acted normal. I asked about her day, cooked dinner once, even watched a movie with her. I didn't want her to suspect anything. All the while, I kept collecting. I checked our shared financial accounts, noting charges that didn't match her alibis. I used a contact in building management, someone who owed me a favor, to get security footage from the Marlowe's lobby. There she was, clear as daylight, walking beside Mark, their shoulders brushing as they waited for the elevator. On the 4th day, I finally felt ready. Everything was cataloged: emails, receipts, photos, footage, organized into a folder on the external drive with dates and times. If I needed to, I could hand it to anyone. A lawyer, her company, even her own family, and let it speak for itself. That night, I left the house without telling her, drove to Tom's, and set my bags in the guest room. He offered me a beer, and we sat in the kitchen, the hum of the fridge filling the silence between us. "You sure you're ready for whatever comes next?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm not sure about much, but I'm sure I'm done letting her think I don't see what's happening." The plan wasn't to explode. It wasn't to shout or cry or make a scene. I wanted precision. A clean break that left no room for doubt about why I was leaving and no way for her to paint me as paranoid or controlling. Before I went to sleep, I checked the drive one last time, making sure everything was there. It felt almost like studying for an exam, the kind where you already know all the answers but you run through them again just to be sure. When I finally lay down, the quiet of Tom's house felt foreign. No footsteps upstairs. No faint glow from Lauren's phone lighting up the bedroom. Just stillness. And for the first time in months, I slept without waking every hour. 3 days after I'd moved into Tom's guest room, I was sitting at his kitchen table, nursing my second cup of coffee, when there was a knock at the front door. It wasn't tentative, it was firm, urgent. Tom was still upstairs, so I went to answer. Lauren stood there. Her hair was unkempt, strands clinging to her face, and there were dark smudges under her eyes. But what struck me first were the marks. Faint purplish bruises along her cheekbone, a small split at the corner of her lip, and scratches across the back of her right hand. She clutched her phone like it was a lifeline. "Adam." Her voice cracked. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer right away. The sight of her like that twisted something in me, something that had nothing to do with betrayal and everything to do with the years we'd spent together. Finally, I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, almost like she was expecting me to slam the door behind her. She stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed over her chest, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. "What happened?" I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. "It's over. With Mark." She swallowed hard. "I told him I couldn't do it anymore, that I wanted to work things out with you. He didn't take it well." I let that sink in. "You're telling me he did that to you?" I asked, my voice low. She nodded once, eyes brimming. "We were in his office after hours. I thought we were alone, but one of the cleaning crew walked in when it happened. He left after that, but..." she trailed off, shrugging helplessly. I didn't know where else to go. I studied her face, trying to decide what was real. Maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe the injuries were exactly what they looked like. But part of me couldn't help wondering if this was just another turn in whatever game she'd been playing. One more move meant to pull me back in. You should report it, I said. Her lip trembled. I can't. It would ruin my career. And, she hesitated, I don't want everyone at work to know what I've done. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt thick with unspoken things. My anger, her guilt, the history we couldn't rewrite. Finally, I said, there's a motel on the edge of the city. I'll pay for a few nights. She flinched. You're not letting me stay here? I shook my head. No, not here. Her shoulders sagged, but she didn't argue. We drove in silence. She kept her gaze fixed on the window, her reflection fragmented by passing streetlights. I pulled into the parking lot of a small, low-rise place that looked clean enough but unremarkable. The kind of place you could disappear into without anyone asking questions. At the front desk, I paid for 3 nights in advance and handed her the key. She took it without meeting my eyes. I'll check in on you, I said, though I knew I probably wouldn't. When I left, I didn't head back to Tom's right away. I drove to a 24-hour copy center and printed a set of documents I'd been organizing for days. Emails, hotel receipts, photographs, and a pair of still images pulled from the security footage of her and Mark in the Marlowe lobby. I slipped them into a large manila envelope, sealed it, and addressed it to the board of directors at her company's headquarters. By the time I got back to Tom's, it was nearly midnight. I set the envelope on the counter, ready to mail it first thing in the morning. The next day, I walked into the downtown post office and sent it certified mail. Watching the clerk stamp the package gave me an odd sense of calm, like the first breath after being underwater too long. I didn't tell Lauren. I didn't tell anyone except Tom, who raised an eyebrow but didn't try to talk me out of it. 2 days later, while I was at work, my phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made my pulse quicken. CEO of Vance and Associates placed on leave pending internal investigation. Mark's name was in the first sentence. The article mentioned allegations of misconduct and possible breaches of company policy, though it stopped short of details. Sources close to the investigation were quoted as saying the board had acted quickly to protect the integrity of the company. That night, Lauren texted me, "Did you see the news?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Yes," nothing else. She didn't reply. The following morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. When I answered, it was a woman from the board's HR department. She thanked me, formally, professionally, for the information I'd provided and assured me it would be handled discreetly. I hung up feeling lighter, though not in a triumphant way. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about clarity, about making sure that the people who needed to know knew. Lauren didn't try to see me again after that. She stayed at the motel until the end of the week, then, as far as I could tell, moved in with a friend across town. For the first time in months, the silence in my life felt like peace rather than tension.